Good afternoon from Palma, but good morning from Fort Lauderdale. Because Mark, what time is it at yours?
It is half six, as they say.
It's really early, and Mark has gotten up very early to do this webinar for you guys. So I think that's a lot of kudos that he deserves for that. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for being there. I know it's like a lot of you are back to normal on the vessel, at least working with or without guests on board. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today for this. We believe is a very interesting topic for any crew member yacht that is either based in the US or planning to visit the US. Correct, Mark? Is that that's what we're talking
absolutely.
about?
Yeah.
And I've been doing a bit of like a pre-chat with Mark, so there's a lot of things that I didn't know, and I normally think that I'm well informed. So please pay attention. Make sure we ask any questions in the chat. We're available. Again, this webinar is recorded, so you can look it back, and we'll end with a nice file handout from Mark and MHG to make sure that all the tips are on one sheet, so that you have that with you. But before we get started, let's do the formal introduction. And the formal introduction means that what are we talking about today? We're talking about the explanation of the US healthcare system from the perspective of a foreigner, the terminology, required documentation, and the common pitfalls. And we're doing that with our partner. Mark has been a member of Acrew. He supports us a lot, so we thank you for that, Mark. And he's the director of a yacht division at MHG. You want to say anything more about your role, Mark?
No, just it's been a wonderful journey working in this business. I've gotten to meet so many great captains and crew over the years. It's really become a globally extended family. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Fantastic. Well, we appreciate it a lot that you're doing this for us today, especially this early in the morning. At least you've got a long day ahead of you, right?
Right. It's Friday.
It's Friday. And so again, repeating explanation of the US healthcare system from the perspective of a foreigner. I will stop this now, and I'll launch your presentation, Mark, so you can take it from there. Guys, I'll pop up anytime I see something in the chat that is relevant, so that I can have a little chat with Mark. We're going to have 2 polls as well at a certain point to ask you to. Well, we don't think it's a difficult question, but let's see if you know the answers. Let's start the presentation. Mark, it's all yours.
Thanks, Ono, and appreciate, again, everybody joining and giving us the opportunity to hopefully give you the opportunity to have as pleasant a possible experience if you come to the U.S. and you need to seek medical care. It is a very complicated system here in the U.S. It's fairly unforgiving if you don't know the rules. And so a lot of crew captains will find themselves kind of as this slide is showing, in that you end up going around in circles, trying to navigate the system, understand terminology, try to figure out, what you need to do in terms of procedure-wise to get your either your claim properly taken care of, whether to simply make an appointment, perhaps with a specialist, or a certain type of procedure that you need done. So there is an awful lot to learn. Today is not to make you an expert by any stretch. Today is really to educate you about some of the basics, to educate you, as Ono mentioned in the beginning, about some of the pitfalls that you can encounter, and then also to field your questions, because here in Fort Lauderdale, although I do work with crew and different types of insurance all over the world, we start to get used to the way it works in the U.S. And so it's always good to hear from others who don't come here when they have questions about something that I would take for granted. So we really would invite you to ask as many questions as you like. And as Ono said, you can email us or call us after the fact, and I'm happy to discuss that further. So just need to move to the next slide here. There we go. So just a quick bit about MHG. For those of you that may not know us, we started back in 1991. At that time, a large yacht was was kind of today's tender, I guess you could say. But in 1999 is actually when we've had our first group of yachts that we provided health insurance to. I didn't join the company until 2005, but I've been there ever since. They can't get rid of me, it seems like. But we work in a large number of different types of insurance, but our specialty is, of course, marine crew, and my specialty in specific is yacht crew, and we provide pretty much anybody who's on a floating object. We can provide them with insurance for their staff or their crew or themselves. We've got a number of us. We've grown quite a bit over the years. We're up to roughly 35 employees. We have an office, the main office here in Fort Lauderdale, but we also have a fully staffed office in the Isle of Man and in Hamburg, and we also have some representation in the other parts of the world. So we are pretty much 24 hours a day, just based on our geography, but we do actually close during the day in each of our various jurisdictions. So I just want to get a first glimpse to kind of give me an idea how to structure the rest of the presentation. And this is where I'll need Ono's assistance, is just to do a quick poll and finding out how many of you have actually used the healthcare system before.
Good. Okay. So I've got like I don't have that poll, Mark. I have the poll about the doctors and the unpaid medical bills. I'm just like, I am here like completely trying to help you. But like, okay, let's do this in the chat, guys. Can you chat, please? How many of you have used the US healthcare system? Just chat yes or no to me. And it's going to take them a few, they got a 10-second delay. It's going to take them a few seconds to get back to us. What would you expect? How many of them would have used the US healthcare system?
You know, I think that there's probably some, you know, it's obviously very common for vessels to spend some time in the US throughout the course of the year. Not everybody has the opportunity to use the healthcare system, luckily. But typically there's been some exposure, maybe even through a fellow crew member that had to do that. So
yeah, well, yeah. So Steve and Decima said yes. Then we got someone says no. So we're at 2/3 at the moment.
Yeah. So a little bit, yeah, basically a mixed.
Pretty mixed group that we're having. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm seeing. So I got another no. So I'm at 50% at the moment. So I think we can expect like that's like 50-50 people that.
Yeah, that's great. That's kind of perfect, actually. Kind of goes in line with what I had hoped would be a mixed audience to talk about, because, you know, even though you have used it before, it doesn't necessarily mean that it went well, or maybe it did, and that's great news. But there's still, it seems like in the U.S. almost every encounter with the healthcare system is different, because of the human element, because of the type of care that you might be receiving, and so on and so forth. Perhaps different insurance that you might have had previously versus the next time you visit the U.S. So we're going to go through some of the basics. You know, again, talking about the terminology, talk about required documentation, common pitfalls. You know, one of the biggest things that I always say is that insurance isn't insurance. In other words, just because you have insurance doesn't mean you have the same thing that everyone else has when it comes to private insurance. As a non-American, of course, most crew are used to a socialized care system that works completely differently than it does here in the US. It's much simpler to use. It's much more user-friendly than the US system. And we don't, you don't have these kinds of foreign terms, for lack of a better word, that we have here in the US. And, you know, the other thing to keep in mind is that the US healthcare system is a for-profit business. And that is a point that makes it just that much more challenging to work through when it comes to settling a bill that you have maybe even unknowingly incurred. So let's talk a little bit about some of the terminology first, and then we'll get into the rest of these items. So the first one I think probably most people are familiar with and aware of, which is what they call the deductible. Often, especially in the UK and in Europe, it's called an excess. And so what that is that you purchase insurance, or your vessel has purchased insurance for you, and they pay a premium, of course, for that insurance. However, most plans, when you go to the doctor, they do not immediately pay for that first dollar of coverage of insurance. You, as the crew member, or you as the vessel owner, depending on the circumstance, will have some additional amount to pay besides the premium that is for the cost of the insurance, that you would pay to a doctor or hospital before the insurance starts to pick up costs. Now, that's not always the case. Again, depends on the kind of care, excuse me, the kind of care that you're receiving, and potentially the plan that you have. But it's important to just know that sometimes you will have a balance due from a doctor or hospital right up front, or they may send you a bill later, could be a month later, could be longer, that you surprisingly owe them, say, $250, maybe $100, maybe $500, depends on your plan and all that sort of thing. But that's what that is. It's some amount that you have to pay, even though you have insurance from the very beginning. The next one is called co-insurance. Might look like coinsurance, but it's actually co-insurance. And what that means is that you're going to help the insurance company pay any bill that you encounter at a doctor's office. So typically, you are the person who is going to be responsible for 20% of that. So say you have a visit and the cost of the treatment is $1,000 US. The insurance is going to pay 100 of that, and you're going to pay 200 of that. That's in addition to if you have a deductible to meet. So if the bill was $1,000, again, let's say, and you have a $250 deductible, you'll have to pay that $250. That leaves $750. Now, out of that $750, the insurance is going to pay 80% of that. So you'll have to pay an additional 20%, which is $150. So in that scenario, you've paid $400 out of the $1,000 bill that you owe, even though you had insurance. And that's just how it works here in the US. Now, there are ways to avoid co-insurance, and we'll be talking about those in a minute. But again, the idea here is that the insurance company wants you to help them to pay the bill, even though you've already paid them premium. How is that different from a co-pay? Well, if you think back to the last slide, we were talking about co-insurance on a percentage basis. Co-pay is a fixed amount. So typically it's for a visit for the sniffles, or for a common cold, or maybe a minor rash, or something along those lines, where you're just going to walk into your GP or a regular doctor, and they're going to look at it and they're going to say, yes, you need a script for this, or yes, you need to rest and do that. If you have an insurance with a copay plan, you would simply pay a flat fee for that visit. It might be, traditionally, it's around $35. So no matter what that cost actually is to the insurance company, you pay $35 when you walk in the door, and that's it. You should not anticipate any further bill and any further responsibility. That's what a copay is. Again, helping the insurance company pay for a bill that you're already paying them for insurance to have. Changing now to in-network. So let's talk for a minute about what that means, in-network, because it's kind of makes you think of the television. Basically, the network is their buddies, and that's kind of an easy way to think about it. The insurance company has made friends with a lot of doctors and hospitals in the US, for example. And because the insurance company has made friends with those doctors and hospitals, they have agreed that no matter what treatment you have at their facility, the insurance company is going to pay an exact amount for that kind of treatment. And they've agreed on every different kind of treatment that you could get, an exact price that they would pay for each one of those different treatments. That's different if it's a doctor who is not a buddy of the insurance company, and there are plenty of those. And so in that scenario, we'd be looking at what's called out of network. I think I've got that as my next slide. Let me just check. Nope, I don't. Okay, so let's say that. So let's talk about that out of network. So they are your, those are people who are not friends of the insurance company necessarily. The reason why you want to avoid doctors and hospitals in the US who are not friends of your insurance plan is because it's going to expose you as a crew member to potentially large medical costs that the insurance company will not pay. And the reason is because, on the simplest form, those doctors and hospitals are not the insurance company's friends. They don't have a contract that explains how much they're going to charge for every treatment that you could possibly get. So it's an advantage to the doctor or the hospital because then they can charge whatever they wish. And unfortunately, you are left holding the bag as the crew member or the patient. But the bad news is, in addition to that, is that you're probably going to run into issues with the claim process. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the required documentation. So one of the best things you can do when you are coming to the US, and this is something particularly for captains or pursers to kind of note, when you start the journey across to come to the US, and even maybe the Caribbean might be a bad idea, reach out to your insurance professional, your broker, your agent, whoever, and say, we are going to be in Rybovich in West Palm Beach. Can you give us a list of 4 or 5, half a dozen doctors that are in the nearby area that are a part of our insurance plan that are in the network? Why is that important? Well, because things happen and they happen quickly, and we don't think a lot of times about insurance as the first call of action when we get hurt or sick. All we think about is, gosh, I want to feel better. Gosh, I want to get better. And we just go to the first place that we find on Google. Again, that's a potentially dangerous situation from a financial perspective as a crew member or a captain. And so if you have that list and you just keep it in the crew mess or in the folder that has all your other documentation about your insurance plan, that will really pay off in the end, because you'll know immediately if someone cuts their finger, oh, we're going to go to Palm Beach Urgent Care right over here on Flagler Street, and all we have to do is show them our insurance. They already know about it. They already know what the coverage is, and I'll be able to just get treated and walk out and probably not have any further issues. We never want to say that you won't have further issues, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the main thing is just to make it as prepared as possible for your arrival to the US, and in the event that you need medical care at some stage while you're here. So the out-of-network providers, again, not friends necessarily with the insurance company, have the ability to charge whatever they wish, and the insurance company will not necessarily pay whatever that doctor decides to charge. I think I've got that as well as another term that we'll speak about in a minute. So this is a repricing discount. That sounds like a very bizarre term, but this is one where those friends of the insurance company, they've decided that Because they're friends, they're going to charge less for the same treatment that you would get from the doctor down the street who is not friends with the insurance company. You can call it a discount. You can call it a friendly discount. I mean, that's what it is. It's designed so you see a bill for $1,000, and you'll get that bill potentially in the mail. Then what's going to happen next is the insurance company is going to review that claim or review that bill. They're going to see that, oh, this doctor is a friend of ours. Therefore, we've already agreed that we only have to pay $300 for this treatment. So the insurance company sends a check to that doctor for $300, even though the bill was $1,000. And the doctor says, oh, that's right, that insurance company is my friend. I'll only charge them $300. And the other $700 disappears magically. It is not your responsibility to pay the additional $700 if that arrangement is in place between the insurance company and the doctor. Even though you got a bill for $1,000 in your hand, the fact that the insurance company paid $300 because they're buddies means that $700 goes away. And that's what a repricing discount means. You'll see that on a form that we call the EOB, which is the explanation of benefits, that comes from the insurance company once they review that bill. So the bill goes from the doctor to the insurance company. The insurance company reviews it. They say, oh, yep, we're going to pay $300. They put it in the computer. It spits out a piece of paper called an EOB, which is an explanation of benefits, as I said. And that will come to you. And what it will say is that we got a bill, sir or ma'am, we got a bill for $1,000, but because he's our buddy, we're only paying $300, and you don't have to pay the rest. And that's how that works. What's that called? Usual, reasonable, and customary. Okay, so this is the doctor who is not a friend of the insurance company. The bill is $1,000. The insurance company says, well, if we were using my friend's doctor, they would only charge the patient $500 for this, and you're charging $1,000 for this. We don't see any reason why you should be charging $1,000 for this other than you're not our friend. So we're not going to pay you more than that. We're only going to pay you $500. And then guess what? The rest of it, remaining $500, becomes your responsibility as the patient, as the captain, as the crew member, potentially as the vessel owner, depending on what the medical treatment is for. And so this is one of the pitfalls about understanding that it's really important in the U.S. To make sure that you're using a network doctor, a doctor who's a friend of your insurance plan, because of this clause right here. And so URC is the term that is used kind of universally on all types of international insurance plans. It stands for usual, reasonable, and customary charges. Again, it doesn't mean that they won't pay a claim that's outside of that boundary, but they certainly are not obligated to as an insurance company. And you might be thinking, well, why would that be the case, that a doctor would charge such a different amount for the same treatment, even if it's across the street, literally, from each other? And the answer is, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. In the U.S., healthcare is a for-profit business. The market will bear whatever people are willing to pay. And so it could be that the doctor that is charging more has more credentials. It could be that they have a specialized degree that is specific to that type of treatment, but that may not make a difference to the insurance company. And that's something that, again, you just have to be aware of and alert of, that you might be facing additional costs if you run into a situation where you're being charged more than what the doctor next door would charge for the same treatment. covering a lot of ground here. I hope that if you're having comments or questions about what I'm covering, that you're able to jot down a quick note that we can come up to earlier. There is a lot, as I say, a lot of terminology in the U.S. healthcare system. It takes, even someone who lives and breathes this every day, like we do, it takes a lot of dedication to stay on top of understanding all the various facets of health insurance in the U.S., all the various terminology, the changing, ever-changing landscape, not only politically, but just legally. If some of you may remember about Obamacare that came into the U.S. a number of years ago now, kind of still is. It's so unfortunately convoluted, but it is really a lot of information to understand and keep track of. So I encourage you to keep a little note, each time you have a question or an issue. And again, always feel free to follow up with us or with your other insurance professionals that you work with, who may have also have experience in the U.S. healthcare system, because the more knowledge you have, the greater the chance that hopefully you're not going to get stuck with a financial obligation that you didn't expect, and hopefully it's not going to be a big one. And that's what this is, patient responsibility. This is what you owe the doctor after your insurance company has paid their part, which could be zero, by the way. So that's, again, very important to understand what insurance you actually have, what coverage do you actually have in your plan. Maybe you only have coverage for certain things. Maybe you don't even have coverage in the U.S. and you didn't realize that, and you're there on holiday. That would be very, very bad. We have seen that happen. And so, the patient responsibility is what is left, whatever that might be, whether it's 100%, 20%, whether it's a copay, as we mentioned earlier, a deductible, an excess. All those different things could potentially be above usual, reasonable, customary. So there's a lot of different ways, unfortunately, that you can find yourself having to pay money that you didn't anticipate. And I also want to make a very good point here. And again, this is not necessarily just for captains, but I think it's an important way to help when you're guiding your crew. A lot of crew feel that the vessel owner will take care of them, and we'll bring this up again a little bit later. The doctor or the hospital or the nurse or the urgent care facility or wherever your GP, wherever you're going to seek care, they don't care whether or not the vessel owner is responsible in the end. The only thing they care about is that you were the person who came to get the care. Therefore, they are holding responsible for settling that bill. They don't care if you have insurance. You are responsible for settling that bill. If the insurance pays it for you, great. But patient responsibility is a really important issue here in the U.S. because that is something that is binding. When you go in to a doctor's office in the U.S., I don't care where you go, the first thing they're going to do is give you paperwork to complete. And every single doctor, every single facility, the paperwork that you are completing is going to require your signature that says, no matter what, you're responsible to settle whatever bills you incur at that facility. Whether you have insurance, whether you think someone else is actually liable for the cost, it does not matter. You are the one. And so the burden lies on your shoulders as the patient to make sure that at the end of the day, whatever is owed to that provider is settled. So it's a big responsibility. It really is. And again, it's something that you have to take on your own shoulders in the US, particularly to make sure that that's taken care of. And we'll talk about what happens if you don't. Luckily, it doesn't go on forever, generally speaking, when it comes to how much more, Mr. Insurance Company, how much more do I have to keep paying, even though I'm paying you premium or your vessel owner is paying you premium. Well, luckily it's spelled out in the plan, and it's called the out-of-pocket maximum. So it's the most that you are going to have to pay, and then your health insurance is covering it 100% for all your covered benefits. So again, we talked about copay, we talked about co-insurance, we talked about deductible. All of those things will total up to an out-of-pocket maximum that you would have to pay in a year, and then you don't have to pay anymore. This is something that you are very unlikely to encounter frequently, but it definitely is something that you will welcome if you are hospitalized in the U.S. for any duration. I want to give you a little bit of, I don't want to scare everybody, but I want you to have a little bit of apprehension about the U.S. healthcare system because of the fact that it is so dangerous from a financial perspective. Most crew captains and people who don't visit the U.S. don't understand just how expensive getting treated here in the U.S. can be. As an example, let's talk about locally here in Fort Lauderdale, Broward County. Broward General Hospital is the most likely place that crew and captains will go in the event of an emergency if you're anywhere in the Fort Lauderdale area. Broward General Hospital is not fancy. They're very good, but it's a regular old hospital here in the U.S., and you're going to well exceed $10,000 your first night in the hospital. And that's not including if you're in an ICU, intensive care unit. It is very, very easy to get into 6 figures of medical costs in the U.S. before you even know it if you are hospitalized. And so having this out-of-pocket maximum is very welcome news for those who may not be aware that their plan has that, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for 20% of this bill, and it's over $100,000. I'm going to be out 25 grand. That's typically not the case. There's usually a limit. It's usually a few $1,000s, maybe 5,000, but you're not going to find yourself in dire straits typically with having to meet just huge amounts of additional costs by being hospitalized. So I hope that provides you at least a little bit of comfort about the cost of care in the U.S. is that your insurance company recognizes that at some stage here you're going to be really snowed under with cost, and so you have to you got to be thinking about that stuff. So here's a good one to finish this up, Ono. Hopefully you've got this one.
Well, I first want to say that you really scared Steve. So good. We're polling. And yes, I've got this one. Doctors in the US can always tell you how much the procedure costs. I'm starting the poll, which means you're going to see it in your chat. And there's only true, false, or I don't know. And so no guessing. Do you know? Is it true? Is it false? Or do you really don't know? Doctors in the US can always tell how much a procedure costs. So far, we're like, the first answers are coming in. So I'm waiting for a few answers. We're at 50-50 now between true and false. Let's see where we're heading. People are like, I'm giving them a few more seconds to answer this one. So far, so good. 50-50, true or false? What's the answer, Mark?
The answer is false. In fact, it is almost never that a doctor can tell you how much it costs for what they are doing to you at that very moment. It really is bizarre. Again, the U.S. healthcare system is a mess. So why doesn't the doctor know? Well, I'll tell you why the doctor doesn't know. Because he or she has isolated themselves from the billing process. Why? Because he's got enough lawsuits on him already. So
do you have an answer? But I'll give you the final answer.
Oh yes,
20% said true, 66% said false, 60% true, 60% I don't know. So most of you guys had the correct answer.
Very good.
They don't know. All yours, Mark.
It's funny. They may know, but they don't want to tell you. but typically they don't know. And the reason is because of the number of layers in the U.S. healthcare system. So typically, let's talk about a brief example. You walk into a doctor's office, and the first person you see is the receptionist at the front desk. She or he is the one that's going to give you the clipboard with the 6 pages that you have to sign and fill out all the information, signing your life away, that you complete all your information, all that sort of stuff. That then gets handed off to somebody else, probably, who types it into a computer system. At the same time, somebody else in that office is picking up the phone to call your insurance to see what kind of coverage you have, whether or not they're a friend of the insurance company or not, so on and so forth. And then a nurse or someone else comes out to bring you into the room, sit there for half an hour if you're lucky, maybe 15 minutes if you're really lucky, maybe 2 hours if you're not so lucky. And then the doctor finally comes in, and the doctor says, "So what's wrong with you today?" And you tell him, and he says, "Looks like you need this or that and the other. And so go do this, go do that. I'll write you a script for this, and have a good day." And he walks out. And then you go back to the, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, no.
Yeah, I just got a question. I thought, like, when they're engaging, that, like Francesca's asking, would you say that the same applies within the Canadian healthcare system? Just as a quick, like, side step.
I would say not as often. I would say that, and definitely, of course, in Canada they have the national health system as well. It's kind of a hybrid system. You can certainly seek private care, obviously, in Canada, but I think that if you're dealing with a private doctor in Canada, they would be able to tell you how much it costs. If you're going through the national health system, you don't even care anyway what it costs. So
okay, perfect. Well, thank you for the answer.
Sure, of course, yeah. So then getting back to our scenario, so the doctor has seen you, you walk out, you go back to the front desk, and the lady says, "Oh, check with your insurance, we'll send you a bill." And you're like, "Can I just pay it now?" And they say, "Well, no, you can't, because we don't know how much you owe." And that's a typical scenario, and so they'll bill you. Unfortunately, what they don't realize is that you don't have an address, or the address that you gave them is not where you're going to be by the time the bill arrives. And so that becomes an issue down the line, again, with the whole idea with patient responsibility. And we'll talk about the common pitfalls a little bit later. But it is very, very strange in the US that it's really the only type of service that you can receive in the US, which is health care, that you do not typically know what the cost is before you get the treatment. If you're going to go and have your car worked on, they always give you an estimate before you have the work done, to tell you this is what we expect. In the US, it's rare that you would get that for any kind of procedures that you would see in the hospital. It would be major procedures generally where you might get an estimation of cost before you have it done. Typically, you just don't know. And so that's really where the challenge it lies. I want to move on, but I also want to mention to you, and again, poor Steve he's going to lose his hair after I say this one, but the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, guess what it is? It's healthcare costs. The leading cause of bankruptcy in the entire United States is healthcare costs. You would not believe that if you didn't hear it, but it's true. So it's really important to be on top of it and make sure that you understand how your insurance works and what bills you may or may not be incurring. All right, so we're going to move on now to documentation. The first one is just a quick summary. So you go to the doctor, you have insurance, and maybe the doctor is not a friend of the insurance company, so they're going to make you pay the bill right then. Well, in that case, you're going to have to go through basically all of these steps here that you see on the screen. You're going to have to complete your insurance company's claim form. you're going to have to make sure you have a copy of the itemized bill or bills. In other words, you need something that explains what did the doctor do to you, what was wrong with you, and what was the prognosis, or at least something along those lines, so that the insurance company knows what it is that you're sending them. You'll need the copy of the receipt showing that you paid the bill. You may need to provide medical records to the insurance company, depending on, again, the scenario. Was this an illness? If it was an illness-related visit, very likely that the insurance company will want medical records from that visit from the doctor. It is not feasible, unfortunately, to get the medical record the day that you're there. The reason is because the doctor is going to scribe all of those medical notes from your visit sometime down the line. It could be that day, it could be the next week, could be a couple of weeks, we don't know. But the key point is that that's something that you may have to follow up on as later to get the medical records to provide to your insurance company. Sometimes the insurance company can get those records from the doctor, but typically it is the most efficient way if you, as the patient, are able to get the medical records from that doctor and then present them to your insurance company. That's really, again, going back to the patient responsibility that we talked about earlier. It is not the insurance company's responsibility to get medical records from the doctor to process your claim. It is your responsibility as the patient to make sure that the insurance company has the information that they need to properly process your claim. And the last one is, and again, the medical records we just mentioned were kind of illness related, could be for an accident, but typically not. If you have an accident, then a lot of insurance companies require some sort of a questionnaire for you to complete as to what happened. You know, why did you show up at the ER with a broken leg and a twisted leg and a twisted arm or whatever it is? Because there are probably exclusions in your insurance contract that may or may not be triggered by whatever it is that you did or whatever someone else did to you, which is also important. Remember that in the U.S. And actually in the abroad, if you are injured or damaged by another person, then that other person or that other person's insurance may actually be liable and pick up the costs so that your plan doesn't have to. Now, again, just to reiterate, patient responsibility means that even if there's another insurance company that's supposedly liable for your bills, you may still be stuck paying them first and then chasing that other insurance company to get reimbursed. We have seen that happen in the U.S. Unfortunately, here in Fort Lauderdale, South Florida in general, people have an appetite for hitting people who are walking and riding their bicycles with their cars, and so it's probably something similar with scooters in Palma or St. Martin for sure, or the other parts of the Caribbean. Scooters are very dangerous, by the way. Don't ride them. But it's something that if someone else hits you and causes you to have medical injuries, they're responsible for that. But of course, again, it's you are the one who's incurring the costs. So at the bottom of the till is you as the patient that is going to have to make sure those bills are satisfied, however that may be. But those are the 5 kind of typical items of documentation that you would need after you have a visit in the U.S. with a doctor, particularly one who is not in network, again, not a friend of the insurance company. It's possible that you would still need some of this documentation even when you use a network doctor, because, and this is again due to the complexity of the system, oftentimes what happens when you have a doctor visit is that a form is generated at the doctor's office called I don't know what it's called, a health insurance something or another. Anyway, it's a form also known as a UB40, by the way, that simply has your basic information on it, the same thing that they keyed in. Remember when you first walked into the doctor's office, they key that into a computer? Yeah, that's for filling out this form. And the only thing else that they put on there besides your name, your date of birth, the date they came in to see you, is a 5-digit code. And that 5-digit code is called a CPT code. Every treatment that you could get in the US has a 5-digit code. And that 5-digit code tells the insurance what the problem was. But it doesn't say how that problem started. It doesn't say why did that problem exist in the first place. It doesn't say, have you had this problem before? It doesn't say a lot of things. And so if that happens, if the insurance company receives that form, even though it's a friend of the insurance company, they still don't have enough information to figure out, well, should we pay this claim or shouldn't we? And so you may still have to fill out at least a claim form so that you can explain, or an accident questionnaire to explain to the insurance company what happened, why were you there, and that way they can properly handle your claim. If you don't do these things, by the way, it just stalls everything. And typically what ends up happening is that 3, maybe 6 months, maybe more down the line, there's a fire burning that you just find out about all of a sudden, and that gets everyone's blood pressure up because it was assumed that it was just paid and taken care of, and it's been 6 months, and why was I notified sooner? On and on and on. And so it really is all about an ounce of prevention, just like having that list of insurance friends before you reach the U.S. Preparing these documentation or preparing to have this documentation when you are about to see a doctor, or just right after you've seen a doctor, is really money in the bank. Even if you don't end up needing it, having it ready and having it completed is really a prudent thing to do, because again, it's all about patient responsibility, and so that makes you liable. So I think we got another poll here. Oh no,
I'm here. So just wait until it's quite a daunting scenario that you're putting out there.
Again, I'm hoping I don't want to scare people away, but I hope that it makes you anxiously enough that you take action when you come to the U.S. to prepare yourself.
I think
that's what it's about.
That's what it's about, and that's what insurance is about in general, right? To prevent you from all the things that could happen.
Yes, exactly.
The poll: do you think unpaid medical bills could impact your ability to re-enter the US? And 3 answer opportunities: yes, no, or I don't know. The poll is out there, and let's see what the answers are coming in. Let's give them a bit of time.
Sure.
So far it's 100% on yes. But that might change. We're not giving anything away. Let's stay at 100% on yes, by the way. Let's see if it moves. If anybody is like, no, that will not impact my ability to re-enter, or I don't know. This looks like a very firm yes.
Good.
Mark.
Well,
is that the correct answer?
Yes, it is. I think that just based on how I've intimidated everyone about the U.S. healthcare system, that they just assume that, yes, obviously there must be a way. Yes, it is. It is possible. I don't want you to lay awake at night thinking that because you went to the doctor once that's going to prevent you from coming back into the United States, because it's very unlikely to be the case. But it is possible, particularly, again, a more significant scenario where you've had hospitalization, for more than a night, or you've had significant amount of care in the U.S. that hasn't been settled, either through your insurance or through your own means, or from the vessel owner, whichever it may be. It's the way it works in the U.S. is, of course, as Americans, we have what's called a Social Security number, and that is tied directly to our credit. And so it's really, really intimidating for us, even as Americans, to have medical bills that are outstanding, because it will actually impact our credit. And we live on credit in the United States, if those of you who may not know that, but we do. And so just because you have a medical bill that hasn't been paid can impact your ability to do just about anything else financially. You may not be able to buy a car. You may not be able to buy a home. You may not be able to get another credit card. There's a number of things that can happen, as a result of that. So as an American, we watch that very, very carefully, even though we're not worried about being able to come back to the country. We watch it very carefully because it's very potentially damaging to our financial livelihoods. And so because of the fact that all of that is kind of intertwined, and that can also make its way to Customs and Border Protection. It can become information that they would have access to see, that someone has substantial unpaid medical bills, and they're going to say no. So it's something to, again, just being alert, being aware. Don't lose sleep over it, but just know about that. Let's go through some quick pitfalls. See, we're getting closer to our hour here. I don't want to put you all to sleep if I don't have to, but let's go through some quick pitfalls. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, the vessel owner will cover me. Don't worry about it. I'll just go to the doctor. I'll leave and get my care because they're responsible, and I don't have to worry about it. Very much not the case. It is really important that crew understand that they are the ones receiving the care. Therefore, they are the ones responsible for making sure that bill is settled. And I just can't reiterate that enough. Not following up, yeah, that's a big one. And again, it's just because of the nature of what we do, right? I mean, we're getting busier and busier every day, it seems like. And of course, if you're on a charter program and you need to see a doctor, you go to the doctor and you get back to that boat as quickly as you can, and you're back on duty, and you're running up and down and whatever. And it just slips your mind, frankly. It's not that you don't have intentions, good intentions to make sure that everything goes well. But not following up is a huge pitfall when it comes to utilizing the healthcare system in the U.S. Because again, bills will just show up from you don't know where. You didn't even know that you incurred that bill. When you go to a doctor, particularly a hospital for significant care, there may be 4, 5, 6 different people that will see you for various reasons. Every single one of them could potentially produce an invoice that none of the others know about and that your insurance company doesn't know about. So you have to follow up to make sure that your bills are properly being handled, sent to the insurance, and being paid. This is an interesting one. Paying up front when you're in network. Why is that a pitfall? Well, because remember, in network is the insurance company's buddy, right? It's a doctor that's a buddy of the insurance, and they've agreed to pay each other a fixed amount for whatever care you got. Remember the example I said, it was normally $1,000, but because they're buddies, they agree to pay $300 and be done with it. Well, the problem is if you pay up front, you're going to be paying that doctor $1,000, and it can be challenging to get your $700 back after the insurance company and the doctor, who's a buddy, agree that, oh yeah, he or she should have only paid $300 for this, but they paid $1,000. Well, now there's $700 of your money sitting in the doctor's office, and they probably don't know how to reach you to give it back to you. And you probably don't realize that, oh, my money's sitting there waiting for me to claim it. So it's a pitfall to try to avoid, is paying up front. Now, doctors and hospitals can be very pushy. They can be very demanding in other parts of the world too, not just the U.S. But as soon as you show up, for example, if you are in Nassau in the Bahamas, a doctor's hospital, and you walk in there bleeding, they're going to want your credit card right now, and they're going to charge you $2,000 right up front. They don't care. And so you have to be not mean, but you have to be assertive when it comes to being asked to pay before anything even happens. You want to be assertive and say, call my insurance. Here's my ID card because I'm a prepared crew member and I have my ID card right here. Call this number. I'll even dial the phone for you to let them call and make sure just how much do you really need to pay right now before you get seen by the doctor. Um, it is an important thing when it's your money that you are potentially going to lose, because just because you paid an insurance, or I'm sorry, just because you paid a doctor $1,000 doesn't mean the insurance company is going to pay you $1,000 back, and that's important to know. Misunderstanding what insurance means. Well, that's what I kind of said in the beginning, is that insurance isn't always insurance. Every different plan has different features, different characteristics, different levels of coverage, different terminology, um, different limitations. And so it is really important to know what your coverage is on the plan that you have. And I always say this as well. It's really important not to rely on someone else telling you what you have, because they probably don't know, or they may misunderstand. And again, and you're the one who's going to be relying on that advice to tell you what's covered and what isn't. But you're the one responsible for the bill if you get one. So it's really important to understand what your plan is, and how do you do that? I mean, should all crew become experts at health insurance? Absolutely not. Please don't. It's awful. No, no, I love my job, but it's complicated, you know, and your job is to run the boat, or to fix the boat, or to clean the boat, or to make it look nice for the boss. Um, so you need to reach out to your insurance professional is the bottom line, whether that's MHG, whether that's whatever other insurance agency or broker that you might be working with. Make sure they explain to you how your insurance works, because and point it out to you so that you can read it yourself and understand what coverage you do or do not have. It really is key. Not being forthcoming. What do I mean by that? Well, tell the truth. That's the funny thing. The insurance company is not interested in working with a patient or a crew member who isn't telling the truth. And they can tell almost always. Let me tell you, we have seen so many times, and most people are good, right? Most people are good hearted and most people are truthful, but it's very tempting sometimes to not be forthcoming with information, because it might potentially lead to your claim not getting paid, or potentially might lead to someone else finding out about your medical history that you would prefer they didn't know about. And so it's very easy to fall into that pitfall of not being forthcoming about information. But I encourage you to be honest and be forthcoming as best you can. Keep it as private as you can. Absolutely. You know, we live in the world of privacy in the health insurance arena. So definitely you have confidence. You know, hopefully you have confidence in whoever your insurance professional is, that if you share information with them, it will be kept with the utmost level of privacy. And I'm confident about that for the bulk of the industry. It is important. You know, being forthcoming and honest is really key when it comes to using your health insurance. And the last one, oh, it's fine. That'll be fine. We all fall into that trap too. You know, I've got insurance. I went to the doctor. The doctor said, "Don't worry about it. You know, he'll bill the insurance. It's fine. I don't have to worry about it." Just goes out of your mind really quickly. Probably not fine. Probably not fine. It's really, again, an easy thing to fall into that trap. A couple real world examples, just real quick. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on them. I see we're at our hour. Oops, I actually didn't include them. So just again, to be quick about it, I've kind of given a few examples already of you know, what typically happens when you visit a doctor's office. The most common thing we see is the after the moment, the after fact. A month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, or more, the bill shows up. The most Common reaction is frustration, anger. This insurance is garbage. I can't believe they didn't pay my claim. Things like that. And that's normal to be expected. Again, you're caught off guard. It's money you didn't expect to have to pay. The letter might be written in nasty language. We're going to send you to collections, blah, blah, blah. All of those things happen on a regular basis. And so the key there is really just to have to start to unwind the process. And at MHG, we are typically encouraging that to be done with your insurance professional's help. Fighting against a doctor's office or insurer directly is typically not ideal. You'll run into scenarios where you might feel like you're getting the runaround. They're not returning your call, they're not answering the phone, they're not giving you clear information. And all those things could have legitimate reasons, by the way, for why that's happening. But because of the scenario and what's happened, you feel like you're being taken advantage of, basically. And as I said, it's a for-profit business, so the insurance company is not thrilled about the fact that they have to pay your claim, but they will if it's eligible under the contract. We definitely see that insurance claims are paid every single day, but that process to unwind is probably the most common example, which I would say is example A, is the bill shows up that nobody knew about, and now we have to start that process of unwinding. Example B is probably the second most common, and the example of that is that you, as a crew member, receive one of these explanation of benefits letters that I mentioned the other day, or that I mentioned earlier, that says patient responsibility, the full amount, whatever it is, $1,000. Claim denied, responsible patient, $1,000. Again, fire alarms, bells, everybody's upset. And actually, all that ever was needed was for you to complete the claim form that we mentioned earlier. That is, it probably is equal to the first example of having a bill show up 6 months later and claims flying. Is you get that explanation of benefits in the mail, your claim's been declined, this insurance is no good. Well, actually it's fine, you just need to fill out that claim form and send it back in, and then they'll reprocess it again and pay it. So that's another reason why it's really important to start the process right away when you first have the visit, to gather that documentation in case you need it. And you can provide it to them ahead of time. You don't have to wait for an insurance company to request a claim form from you. You can be proactive. Hey, that would be good. Be proactive and provide them with that information up front so that they already have it on file. Once the bill comes in, they simply attach it to that claim form, and they have a full picture right there in front of them that hopefully includes sufficient information for them to say, yeah, looks like this claim is eligible. Let's get it paid and let's get it off our desks, because that is their goal as well as your goal. You want to get it off your mind. They want to get it off their books as far as claims go. The insurance companies, and now we're kind of getting away from the US, but insurance companies do not want your claim sitting on their desk for 6 months. They do not. They want to get it, they want to review it, and they want to pay it, or they want to decline it and be done with it. And so it's as helpful to them as it is to you to provide them with the documentation that they need to file that claim. And of course, in the US, again, it's just more complicated. So that's why it's really emphasized or really important here is to provide that documentation. The last example I can give you is typically, well, I had that on my other boat. And I know that sounds silly, but what was covered on my other boat is so common. And so the example is going back to what I said earlier, which is that you have to be aware of what coverage you actually have on your plan that you have at the moment. Insurance is not insurance. Everything is very customized, very individualized by a vessel, even by individual, depending on the type of insurance that you have. And so in the US, again, in particular, if you're seeking care and you are under the impression that something is covered because you had it on your other boat, but in actuality, it's not. That is a common thing that we do see. So you have to, unfortunately, that's going to be your responsibility to pay. Not much you can really do about that. What's good news, and I'll close with a little bit of good news if I can, is in every situation where you have a outstanding bill, whether because you have co-insurance, because you have no insurance, or some other reason, in the US, you always have the ability to negotiate. And I know that, again, sounds almost immoral, really, but you do. You have the ability to negotiate the bill. We have seen crew that have been able to achieve enormous discount. And that's really important because when you're talking about thousands of dollars that you might have to pay, a simple phone call with a little bit of honey and a little bit of sugar, you might be surprised what you might be able to get your costs down to. So that's a good thing about the U.S. healthcare system.
Mark, and I think we've got one big question there.
Okay.
So I'm going to just close your presentation that show the full, because it was your last slide, right, Mark?
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Perfect.
Questions.
There's like a big question from Steve, and he says like, so, ... which means I'm thinking of bringing my yacht to South Florida, Bradford or Rybovich perhaps. What to do to avoid these pitfalls? That gives me a moment also to start sharing that file with the tips, right? Like,
yes, absolutely.
So let's put that in here. So guys, there's a file now shared in your chat with the tips, but I think it's, let's take this one as a final question for you to answer before we say goodbye to everybody.
Sure. Yeah, it's all about preparation, Steve. It really is. Just thinking ahead with getting that list of, the few providers that are in your area. Like, as I say, Rybovich is a very, very common destination for yachts, of course. And so having, half a dozen locations that you can go visit as part of your plan handy, and kept it in the crew mess or wherever, or just tell the crew, say, we've done some research. We have a list of doctors that you can use as part of your plan. And so that way they know about it before that happens. And then we have this sheet that Ono will be sharing that we've prepared as well. It's just I think it's 5 bullet point thing to help you prepare for these things and stay in touch with your insurance professional throughout the process. Encourage the crew to reach out to their insurance professional, even if it's something simple like a cut. I always say, me and my team, we always say, don't ever hesitate to reach out to us, because even if it's nothing, we want to prevent it from becoming something. And we are happy to do that. And most insurance brokers and agents are happy to do that. Trying to work directly with an insurance company isn't always easy. You call the 800 number, you're on hold for 20 minutes, whatever it might be. We want to avoid that. And so those are the things that you can do is really just to stay on top of the situation before it gets out of hand. Hope that's helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Guys, this was not meant to be a depressing session. It was meant, but I think it's all about pitfalls and good preparation. I hope this has answered a lot of questions or has confirmed what you already knew, which in both cases is excellent. Mark, thank you so much for doing this. I'm pretty confident that this webinar will be watched back several times by some people. And so again, we're recording this, so it's going to be on our website, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. Mark, shall we just put the tips and tricks up as well, just for people to find it there as well? Absolutely. We'll do that as well so that they're available. Again, everybody, thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon and weekend for everybody in Europe. And Mark, have a wonderful day and weekend.
Thank you very much.
In Florida. And Steve says, thank you guys. Well, people are getting some chats in that they find it very interesting. So I think you did a great job, Mark. Thank you very much. Yeah. We're gonna be out in 5, 4, 3. 2, 1. Bye-bye, everybody.